Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a post about the industry of thieves. It's going to be about plagiarism, of course, one of my favorite topics. In publishing, there are insiders and outsiders. Sarah Grant, who I'm sure is a lovely person, is an insider, and she was allowed to pass through the pearly gates because of her connections and because she'd written a reasonably good book that was pitched as 1984 meets The Handmaid's Tale, two books that are still under copyright. The blurb describes a protected enclave in which free speech is dramatically limited, and women are lured in by glamour and exceptionalism, only to be treated like mistresses and forced to make babies in obscurity. Since this could be a description of certain people's reality, or of other cult stories like Midsummer, I wouldn't fault it for similarity to the work of some prescient authors. In any case, once inside the pearly gates, Sarah Grant was introduced to the rules of the game. Publish often and be a team player. While hordes of aspiring writers clamored for the attention of a literary agent, she would go to regular meetings during which the outlines of books that needed to be written were discussed. People would give their proposals, and they would be given a thumbs up or a thumbs down by the group. Within this system, she would publish books on a regular schedule as a professional author. This must have been where she developed what to me sounds like a bad habit. This is a quote from a video she was on. I was writing a story and I wasn't sure where it was going until I realized that it was Little Miss Sunshine with a bit of Manchurian Candidate mixed in. Then I knew exactly what to do with it, and I could consult those resources to know where to take the story. So my advice to you is to figure out the pitch of your story and then return to those resources whenever you get lost. Wait a second. When I was in school, I was taught that if you needed to have your resource next to you while you're writing, you need to explicitly cite it, and to avoid copyright infringement, your sources of inspiration shouldn't even be in the same room as you while you are creating your product. So, to me, the difference between inspiration and copyright infringement is, like, if you're inspired by something, you've read the book, you say, oh, I like that, you put it away, and you don't pick it back up until you've finished writing your own book. But if you keep going back to your resource material and looking for ideas, you're probably doing something you shouldn't be doing. So I just thought it was, I doubt she crossed any lines when she did that in her own work, but it just says something about the culture of the community she was a part of, that this was considered to be okay. So if a community is used to ripping off other people's material, they really wouldn't think twice about the legality of such a working style, because if everybody's doing it, that means it's legal, right? All stories are in the public domain, right? I'm not so sure about that. I don't really care if people write fan fiction, but why are insiders, people who have a leg up in the industry, getting paid to rip off other people's stories? If they're giving, new material that is submitted to their industry a low ranking, giving it a bad review at the same time that they're stealing it, you've got a broken system. I do not think that rip-offs are a victimless crime. And if I had read, say, Sarah Grant's book before I saw Little Miss Sunshine, I might have gotten bored because I would have recognized the story arc and character types. I really can't count how many movies or series that I quit watching halfway through because they were so predictable. Originality has value, and it is protected by copyright for 70 years after an author's death. The other problem with rip-offs is that they are far too easy to make compared to the original. I once did a little experiment where I had a book that had copied from mine. I mean, like it was like 55 plot elements in sequence. And I had outlined all of the things that were copied, and it gave me like this very detailed outline of my book. And I did an experiment by seeing how quickly can I use this outline to create a new version of my book. And I was able to write a new book within a week. So it showed me, if you already know the story you want to tell, it's really easy to write it. It's much more difficult to tell a story that nobody's ever told before. So I looked up the author of Little Miss Sunshine, and he apparently wrote that although the basic story concept, I mean that can be said within a few sentences, was sketched out within 3 days, he spent years fine-tuning it and developing the characters to create an original portrait of our time, and that is why he won so many awards for it. Inspired by this train of thought, I did a little experiment. It took me, oh yeah, I already said this, didn't I? So these examples have taught me why it is so unfair when someone comes along and rehashes another author's original work, borrowing their world building or set of characters. It is simply too easy to rewrite someone else's book, or to take 2 books and splice them together without changing that much. It can literally be done within days, whereas the original books often took years or a lifetime of experience to construct. I read a book recently by someone named Jasper something, and it read like someone had taken a guy's travel memoir and spliced in a sort of chase scenario where the man was being chased by a criminal. But it felt like 2 different writers, you know? Think of James Clavell doing years of historical research for his classic novel, Shogun, and then a modern author comes along and writes a simplified, dumbed-down version of his story with a bunch of extra blood and gore mixed in. That's just not fair. What really bothers me is that authors who have never done truly original work simply can't understand what I'm complaining about. They tell themselves there are no new stories, and they fall in love with their ability to put words onto a page, even when those stories those words tell are stolen from people with far more imagination and life experience than they have. Since I quit my job as a physicist to write some books, I've learned that authors who rehash other people's work can be found within the ranks of industry insiders and outsiders, but I blame the insiders for giving a culture of plagiarism their stamp of legitimacy. If Sarah Grant is a publishing insider, Karen Inglis is an outsider. She looked at the speed with which insiders like Sarah Grant produce books as part of a team effort, and she decided to imitate them by using self-publishing platforms like Amazon. She noticed that many books borrowed heavily from famous works, so she decided to try the same trick and rewrite a children's classic called Tom's Midnight Garden with a couple of modern twists. She'd call her story The Secret Lake. I think that someone needs to tell these authors to stop. Their skill at crafting a sentence or a paragraph does not give them the right to steal other people's stories. If they want to use their craftsmanship rather than their storytelling ability. They should become editors, not writers. This all connects to a recent ruling about Led Zeppelin and a claim that they copied what is arguably the most famous guitar riff in history, denying credit to the man who created it, a Californian man with whom they toured. So President Trump weighed in, and he weighed in on the side of Led Zeppelin. I mean, there's a lot of similarity, but people who play guitar all say, come on, this is obvious. This is something that people will do. That it's just it's not a lengthy enough sequence to copyright. And I can see that, but I think we should have a defined mathematical standard for how many notes in order, for example, you can copyright. So what I heard was, you have this descending guitar sound, but then there was also sort of the same movement over a longer, I don't have any musical language, but it was more than just that little riff. It was more than just the little guitar part that was similar. So to anyone in the know, the story about Led Zeppelin is old news. So here's a guitarist. He says, I've played guitar for about 30 years. And one thing I know about Led Zeppelin is that they stole most of their biggest songs. Most of them were written by Willie Dixon. He practically owned Led Zeppelin. He sued them so many times. The law states that a song is identified by the melody, and the melody from Stairway is stolen. The lyrics are original, but that's not the issue. Whole Lotta Love is a Muddy Waters song. Lemon Song is a Blind Lemon Jefferson song. Boogie Mama is a John Lee Hooker song. Dazed and Confused is a Jake Holmes song. The problem is English bands did not understand that many American blues artists were performing songs that had been written by Willie Dixon, and Willie could give the song to whoever he wanted. Also, these blues guys all knew each other. The British bands just assumed that the songs were open source and they could do it too. And obviously they did it to anybody, not just American blues artists. The Beatles were guilty as well. Chuck Berry sued the Beatles many times and won. So it seems that copyright enforcement seems to ebb and flow with the times, and when the internet came into full effect, the copyright enforcement just kind of went out the window. But I think we're going to be returning to a time of law and order in which copyrights are enforced again. And you need this because craftsmanship suffers when you're looking at ripoffs. Just think about how shoddy a ripoff is in terms of clothing. You have the high quality clothing, and then you have really poorly constructed kind of clothes. And you can't order a dress off of the internet because when it gets to you, it's made out of plastic. That's kind of what books are turning into these days. You are expecting some reasonable amount of craftsmanship, but they're, copied. When artists are given a strong incentive not to give credit to their influences lest they be punished, this leads to a culture of dishonesty, in which only people with bad character are allowed to succeed. Perhaps it has been like this since the beginning of time, but I think it might be worse these days with the internet. There used to be something called honor and authenticity that was worth more than money, but The fake news information economy has removed the value of honor because no one can verify if it is deserved or undeserved. When someone is tarred and feathered in the press, was it a made-up charge used to punish a political dissident? Or did they really do what was claimed? Even voices and videos can be faked so easily in the present day that people will soon stop believing in those as well. I know that I lost faith in most published books today. If the author isn't buying their book off of a black market so that they can launder some money, they are rehashing other people's stories and trying to profit off of other people's work. Some authors are so pinned in by the expectations of their genre that they are forced to capitalize off of initial success by writing the same book again with a small twist, like the stakes are higher. So one person recently complained that the second Ready Player One book was basically the exact same as Ready Player One, the original. They were just the exact same plot. No change, just higher stakes. Authenticity and originality are valuable and scarce in the media today. And to change this, we all have to get better at identifying fakery. In publishing, the surest sign of fakery is someone who publishes too often, either rehashing material from other people or from themselves. We all have to say, I want the original because I like authenticity, and I want to know what inspired that author. I want to know the genealogy of that work. So every good book, it comes from somewhere. It comes from life experience, from a dream, from 20 years of experience. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It really doesn't. And the authors who claim that it's just they're just getting it from nowhere, from pure inspiration, they're all lying. Every single one of them. I mean, you kind of have to write a book or two to understand that, but it's the truth. It really is. I mean, once you understand the mechanics of how a book is put together, you understand that when you're putting a book together within a week or so, you're ripping off something. You are not doing original work, and you are not creating something that is really contributing to any form of culture. So with that, I think I will sign off. I encourage you to click on the link below to the blog post. It has a nice overview of all of the posts I've written on this, and eventually I'm going to compile them into a book. There's enough for a book here. Thanks for watching. Until next time.